Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of The Creative Insider, a podcast that will help you succeed in every creative field. Hello, and welcome. This is me, your host, Georgi Lesztarski, and today we will be discussing how to overcome the fear of releasing your work, a fear which is very common among creatives. Releasing your creative work, if you're a student, a beginner, or a professional in a creative field, can cause overwhelm and stress. But why? What is the reason for that? Well, basically it's ego. Let me explain a little more. Usually, the greatest fear of a creative is that his or her work will not be appreciated because it's not of a good quality. So you might think this is not having a big ego, this is actually being very humble. Let me dive a little deeper to understand better what I mean. When we create something, we tend to impersonate the result of our work, as if our work were part of ourselves. But our creations are not part of us, they are simply the fruit of our imagination, the result of an idea. But what is an idea? An idea is simply a mental projection of a possible outcome. When we have an idea, we are full of excitement because in our head, the result of this idea is perfect. But the truth is, when we're just starting out in a creative field, we don't have the ability to realize that idea exactly as we have imagined it. And as we impersonate our work, because our personal ego, we don't want to suck. We don't want our ideas to suck, and we don't want our work to suck. But this is a huge mistake. And it's a huge mistake to not release our work. But once we understand this mental process in our head, there are some tactics we can use to change our mindset. Let me explain 3 strategies I personally think are useful. The first strategy I will call understand your league. It's a sport analogy. Everybody as kids has played some sports. Let's say you're just beginning to play soccer or basketball. It's very likely that your idols will be someone like Cristiano Ronaldo or LeBron James. It's very likely that your idols will be someone like Cristiano Ronaldo or LeBron James. When you think about playing that sport in your head, you already visualize yourself like them, having the best move and skills, kicking the ass of the opponent, and getting the ovation from the crowd. But as soon as you put feet on the soccer field or basketball court and you start playing, you suddenly realize that you're simply not able to execute those movements in the way they can. It's very different from your imagination. This is because your brain is biased from what it already knows. I'm still victim of this trap. I can make an example with the same podcast. Before I have started the podcast, when I was used to listen to the most popular podcasts, I've always thought, it's so simple, it's just talking on a microphone. But as soon as you start, you realize that it's not easy at all. It's not easy at all to make a podcast sound so natural and seamless, to make it sexy for the listeners. It requires practice and consistent work. But what you also realize is that you're not in the same league as your idols. My competition here is not Joe Rogan. Like when you start playing basketball, you do not start playing in the NBA, you start in the local neighborhood league. My competition is someone that has just started a podcast as me. And my goal is just to be slightly better each episode, and not to compare myself with the best in the game. So for you, for example, if you're an architect, the competition is not Zaha Hadid. If you're designing dresses, your competition is not Armani. If you're starting an online shop, the competition is not Amazon. You just need to redefine your league. So let's see the second strategy. As I said in the beginning, the cause of our fear to release our work is that we consider them part of us. But the reality is that they're not. So the second strategy, I will call it, it's not about you, it's about getting better. A good practice would be not to think that if your creations suck, you suck, but consider it the result of your current abilities. And releasing it is just a way of getting a reality check, a good feedback to get better. For example, when I was an architecture student, every semester we would have a design course during which we had weekly reviews with the professor. Reviews during which all students would show their progress in front of the whole class. Some of the professors were very strict and harsh with the student, which caused fears in us. And consequently, some students were afraid to show their work because they feared being embarrassed in front of everyone. Personally, I have always been pretty thick-skinned and I wasn't afraid to test myself. Sometimes I would show my work, convinced that it was perfect, but the feedback I received was just horrible. Sometimes I would show a work done quickly and I would be put back in my place because I hadn't worked hard enough. Sometimes I was convinced that my work was bad, but it was actually appreciated for things that I haven't even considered. In Ray Dalio's book, Principles, I read that successful people do not see reality for what they would like it to be, but for In Ray Dalio's book, Principles, I read In Ray Dalio's book, Principles, I read that successful people do not see reality for what In Ray Dalio's book, Principles, I read that successful people do not see reality for what they would like it to be, but for what reality actually is, and act accordingly. In our brain, we have our own reality, our own biases. The importance of putting out your work is to get that reality check as soon as possible. If you currently suck, you need to know it so you can improve. If you have been lazy, you know it so you can get your ass at work. If you're good, you need to know it so you can keep going in the same direction. But if you never release anything, you'll never know how actually really your situation looks like. And the third and final strategy I always use is not to be a perfectionist. You'll never have it all figured out. A lot of people seek perfection. They need to have it all figured out before they release anything. Well, the truth is that perfection does not exist. There is only improvement, no perfection. I have confirmed this theory by reading the book The Lean Startup from Eric Ries. I have discovered that most of the startups fail because they put too much effort and resources into creating their first product in a perfect way, and when they do and release, it's something that the clients didn't even want it, so they fail quickly, just because they have aimed perfection. The solution for this problem in the book is called MVP, which stands for Minimum Viable Product. Eric Ries uses the story of Dropbox to explain this concept in his book. Dropbox is today one of the most worldwide famous cloud services. Basically, it's this sort of magic folder on your computer where you drop your files, they get uploaded on a server, and you can download that same exact folder on multiple devices so that your information is always available for you. The guys who got the idea of Dropbox needed investments, but you can imagine that it's impossible to make a working Dropbox just from one day to another to get some investments. With the few resources they get, they created something different. They made a PowerPoint presentation with a story of a tourist who went to Africa. He dropped his laptop in a river, but he wasn't stressed that he had lost his data because he had Dropbox. And by accessing to any device, he would have been able to get back his files and download his folder. So the MVP, the minimum viable product, is something that explains what will be the final result of your project, but in the same time it's easy to make and gives you the chance to get fast feedback about your idea. And learn from the information you get from this feedback and act accordingly to improve what will be the final result. So, these were my strategies I used to overcome fear of releasing my work. My final advice to you is just to try to change your mindset and consider releasing your work. My final advice would be just to try to change your mindset and consider releasing your work, not your public humiliation, but just a step forward to improve. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the process. Create your convictions, but hold them loosely. Accept critique and feedback. Take it positively and take out of it what you consider the best and useful to your cause, which is having better results. You can always text me and tell me what are your strategies. So you can always text me and tell me what are your strategies to overcome fear and so I would like to know what are your strategies to overcome fear of releasing your work. So you can do I would like to know what are your strategies to overcome the fear of releasing your work. So you can just text me on the usual social media channels, which are on Instagram at TCI Podcast, the Facebook page, The Creative Insider, and the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. During the week between the episodes on those channels, I'll be releasing some carousels with graphic, which explains further the concept I talk about here. And so if you're interested in more content, go check them. Feel free to follow, comment, and like the feed. Thank you again for the support received until now. Myself, I've been looking forward to receive your feedback, to get better, to improve the podcast, and I hope my game is leveling up. I hope you found this content useful, and I hope you'll be tuning in on the next episode when we'll be discussing some strategies to learn new skills. Thank you, everybody, and see you next week. Bye-bye.